Okay, thank you. Yeah, so they're watching. Yeah. Well, I don't think you're still there. If it's not, then it's already. Yeah. Yes. Yes. It's very because we have to discuss. Oh, yeah. Well, Steve and I are, second
And I always
I guess. Last meeting was about the same. The only one hired all here. Me and Lauren have had to discuss that one day. So it's on the browser.
and I go into their screen and I just go share. And then I have to like
And then you have to go to
hide this.
or just go to the file.
So
It does take.
that's why.
Well,
All right.
we're all. Yes. Well.
What'll happen is she's switching to one presentation.
I'm sharing via.
So that when you share, she'll see the board. So.
All right, good morning, everybody. I have 9:30. Looks like we're coming in a little late in the cold this morning. But yes, Kai, would you start out with the roll call for us, please?
Yes, sir. Tim Andrus,
Here.
Ryan Bale, John Byram, Kurt Campbell,
Here.
Andra Wision, Debbie Farmer, Charlie Flatten, Steve Metzler,
Here.
Terrell Graham, Vic Hildebrand, Tom Youngman, Aaron Teague, present. Jason Ammerman,
Here.
Scooter Mangold,
Here.
Andrew McBride, Daniel Meyer, Gary Middleton, Travis Pruski,
Present.
Donovan for Robert Puente,
Here.
Vanessa Quigg Williams, Humberto Ramos,
Here.
Weldon Riggs,
Here.
Roland Ruiz,
Here.
Daryl Brownlow,
Here.
Darren Simmons, Mitchell Sowards,
Present.
Jonathan Stinson,
Here.
Paul Kite, Ryan Kelso,
Here.
Diane Wasenick,
Here.
Adam Yablonsky,
Here.
Dan Yoxel, Carly Rotzler,
Here.
Tony Franklin.
Yes, Tony. Tony.
Thank you. Tom Hegemeyer, Ileana Delgado, Don McGee, Michelle Foss, Charles Wiedenfeld, Jamie McCool, Carl Kroll.
Moving public comment, getting this submitted to you. Anybody that public have any comment they'd like to make at this time? So now we'll look for item number 3, approval of minutes from the previous meeting, the South Central Texas Regional Water Planning Group. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Riggs, seconded by Mr. Mangold. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed, the minutes are approved. Moving to item number 4, discussion of appropriate action regarding the filling of vacancies, and vacancies to result in future term expirations or resignations. As this is a standing agenda item, there are currently no vacancies on the planning group or terms to address this time, so we're going to move right to item 5. So now, status report and communications by the Water Development Board. Michelle? We got to be quick this morning.
All right, good morning, everybody. Should have some slides. But we'll start out, we've got an update on funding and whatnot. We have 3 applications in for SWIFT funding this cycle from Region L, GBRA, Alliance Regional Water Authority, and SAWS. We've got if there are any additional information, clarifications needed, you should have received an email with a response of tomorrow to get information back to us. And then invitations to submit complete applications for funding will be sent out either late March, early April. We've had some questions about SWIFT eligibility since we kind of have a gap year between the 2026 SWIFT funding cycle and the 2027 state water plan. The board has determined that projects that are in the 2026 regional water plans will be eligible for SWIFT funding for next year's 2026 SWIFT funding cycle. So I'm sure that's good news for several folks around the room. And an item that is not on the slides is agricultural water conservation grants. Just opened up this week. Application process goes through March 19th, and we've got $1.5 million up for grabs. So for our agricultural users, definitely keep that in mind. That is a grant, not a loan. We've got a lot of IPP resources on the web. I'll go over an abbreviated version of the process schematic in just a minute. We've got a public notice summary document on the website as well, and I'll also briefly go over that. And then we've got notification lists that are handy. So next slide. So after today, with your hopefully adoption of your initially prepared plan for your 2026 regional water plan, there's going to be a parallel track going on. Your technical consultants and political sub are going to submit the IPP to us on March 3rd. And on the board side, we will be reviewing that and providing formal comments to regional water planning groups within 120 days. Our actual internal deadline of providing informal comments back to the planning groups is actually late May. So we're actually aiming for a little under 90 days.
I found a speaker.
Oh, I don't know how to do this. Let me ask Garrett. I don't know.
And then, once the regional water planning group gets comments, you'll have, an opportunity to consider those and address them, before you, adopt your final plan. On the other side of the table, your sponsor and your technical consultant will be posting, IPP hearing notice at least 30 days before the public hearing. Or if you're having multiple public hearings, it'll be before your first public hearing date. IPP documents will be delivered to public locations as necessary, and the public comment period will open. You'll hold your public hearings, and then the public and other agencies will have the opportunity to provide comments 60 days from your last public hearing if you have multiple public hearings. And then address comments, submit your final plan. Next slide. So for the public hearing requirements, you have to have at least one in-person or hybrid in-person and virtual public hearing within the planning area. You can have multiple hearings, and those additional hearings can be hybrid or virtual only. And the format is entirely up to you. You can have plan on having a brief presentation to give an overview of the plan, or you can just have, a few posters or reference materials in the room and kind of have an open house forum. It's entirely up to the group's discretion on how they would like to do that. Next slide. Okay, notice published at least 30 days public to the prior to the public hearing. Needs to be posted on the Regional Water Planning Group website, Texas Secretary of State website, and a newspaper of general circulation in each county of the Regional Water Planning area. So that's a lot of newspaper notices for this region. Also needs to be provided to all the voting and non-voting members, adjacent regional water planning groups, and any regional water planning groups where a water management strategy is being considered. County judges, mayors, and municipalities with a population of 1,000 or more, special or general law districts, river authorities, retail public utilities, and water rights holders for surface water diversions in the regional water planning area. Again, a lot of notices. Next. And a clarification for this slide. We recognize that since right now the notices published in the newspaper are paper newspapers, not just online only, that's been on our wish list the last couple of legislative sessions, and has died on calendar both times. Still going up to the ledge for that request, but you know, the cost per column inch can get pretty expensive in a major newspaper, so the locations of where IPPs are available for public inspection can be listed on the Regional Water Planning Group website, and you just have a line in the newspaper notice that says, you know, locations are available at the website, and just a web address. Next. Again, 30 days prior, 60 days after. Public review at one library and one county courthouse in each county in the regional water planning area. Copies can be electronic on electronic media like a flash key or a hard copy. And the IPPs must be available for review beginning the day the notice is published in the paper. Next. I think that's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Michelle.
All right. Very good.
All right, so moving to item 6, status report and communication related to the regional water planning, including reports by the chair, regional liaisons, groundwater management area representatives, and members of the planning group. I'll start with GMA 9. I don't have an update different than what the last one was because we met not that long ago. So any other updates from any of the groups?
GMA 13, again, is meeting on April 11th in Pleasanton at 10 a.m. For those who are interested in seeing what's going on there. Today actually is an important day, GMA 13, in that the Water Development Board has requested this as the final day to receive comments on GMA 13's revised 2024 revised GAN. Actually, it was the 2023 GAN that underwent a revisement, and a second revisement. But so the review is on this point, what we're calling the 2024 revised GAN. And those comments are due to the Water Development Board today, November 20th, by close of business. And we'll see what happens between now and April 11th at our meeting. And that's all.
Thank you, Dara. Anyone else?
7 met yesterday. They are working on their dam. They're doing a new model for 7 for the gym for the Evers Trinity. And there was some discussion whether it would be ready or not by the time. They're probably going to use the old model and not the new model.
All right, any other updates? Thank you, guys. So moving to item number 7, consideration and appropriate action regarding presentation by technical consultant regarding schedule and progress updates.
Okay, good morning. Happy February. And I guess technically second quarter of 2025 for our purposes. This particular agenda item will just include schedule progress and updates on completed new or ongoing efforts and updates on draft chapters. Before I begin, actually, I wanted to recognize a couple of people who are here. On our team, we have Richard Hoffpower with Richard Hoffpower Consulting. He does all of our water availability modeling, and he will be presenting later. And we also have Alicia Smiley here with Flatten Beach. We also have several members of our team on the phone, including Jane Burke and potentially Christine Westerman with SWCA and Laura Ron PR. I just wanted to extend my
deepest, sincerest gratitude for all of our team members, because this has been a lot of effort, and I really appreciate everything that we've been able to accomplish here. Schedule progress. This is an overview of the 5-year schedule, and you can see we're in the last year of the 5-year cycle. We're wrapping up all of the different tasks, except for task 10, and the major milestone that we're moving towards is this red flag down here for the March 3rd deadline to submit the initially prepared plan. And this is a zoomed in version of the 2025 anticipated Region L schedule. We're here in February. Sorry. In February, and so at this February 20th meeting, we're planning on presenting the Chapter 6 cumulative effects analysis results and updates on any chapters, and hopefully adopt the initially prepared plan or IPP. I've gone ahead and I've added this little blue dot showing TBD for the IPP public hearing. At that public hearing, we'll be presenting an overview of the IPP in general, and then also providing an opportunity for formal written and oral testimony from the public. And our next meeting isn't until August. We will be providing an overview of the comments that we received from the Texas Water Development Board and from the public and from other agencies, just as Michelle was mentioning earlier. They have 120 days to look at the plan, review it, and provide comments on ways that we can address any issues in order to get the plan finalized. And so once we get all of those comments, we'll compile them, and at this particular meeting in August, that will just basically be an overview of what comments we've received, and then presenting proposed responses to some of these, because it's a delicate balance of, we get the comments, we develop a proposed response, we must get your approval, and we also have to get the board's approval before we can make the actual edits in the final plan, and then you can adopt it. So it's a few different steps here. So at the August meeting, it will basically be sort of a preliminary review of the proposed responses. And then at the October meeting, that's when we'll summarize any changes that have happened since the August meeting, and then it'll provide an opportunity for you all to adopt the final plan before submittal of the final plan, which is due October 20th. So we'll be meeting October 2nd and to adopt and then submitting October 20th. Moving on to updates on completed, new, or ongoing efforts. So we have provided all of the draft chapters to you all for review and comment, and we'll present proposed responses and the updates to those chapters later in this agenda item. We sent out surveys for task 5 to sponsors to request implementation status of certain water management strategies. This is a new requirement this cycle, and it's specific to strategies included in the plan for this cycle that are of particular significance to the board, like ASR or brackish groundwater projects that are greater than a particular threshold volume. For Chapter 6, we're finalizing that chapter. That's the impacts of the regional water plan and consistency with protection of resources. We completed the cumulative effects analysis and the environmental impacts analysis. And when we sent you draft Chapter 6, that included the results of that analysis, and it included environmental results and the quantitative results, but the descriptions that accompany those tables will need to be updated before we submit the IPP. And then later on in this agenda item, we'll be presenting the full results of those cumulative effects analysis later. We have finalized Chapter 9, the implementation and comparison to the previous regional water plan. Chapter 9 is sort of a combination of Chapter 9 last cycle plus Chapter 11 last cycle. So we sent surveys to water user groups requesting information on the implementation of strategies that were included in the 2021 plan, and asked about which ones have been implemented, the implementation status and the funding. We have compiled those survey responses and included that in Appendix 9A. And we'll present the results of that evaluation in subsequent slides. We are continuing the TWDB database entry That's sort of where a lot of our team's time is being spent right now, on DB27. And so we'll include the DB27 reports as, I think we'll probably just include it as a link, in the executive summary, as opposed to actually including all the reports in the document itself, because it's sort of unruly, and we now have that option this cycle from the board, that we can just include a link with instructions on how to navigate to that link. And then we will also include relevant DB27 reports in certain chapters, like chapters 2, 3, and 4. So, for example, chapter 2 is population and water demand projections, so we include database reports about population for all the bugs, or about demand projections for all the bugs, that sort of thing. And then we're finalizing chapter 10, public outreach and interregional coordination efforts. The interregional coordination efforts has increased over the last couple of months, coordinating with all of our neighboring regions, because we share a lot of water user groups with regions K and P and N. And we completed that draft chapter 10 and provided it to you all. It says we'll present results of the chapter presented in subsequent slides. So moving on to updates on draft chapters. So in general, the anticipated updates that I'm seeing for the between what we sent y'all and what we end up submitting for the IPP, it includes continuing DB27 data entry. And then we may need to make revisions to the plan chapters or make adjustments to certain numbers to make sure that the report is consistent with DB27. We'll update the executive summary to make sure that that is consistent with all the chapters. We'll format it and compile and update any table of contents that these figures and tables. And for chapters 1, 2, 3, and 8, and actually add on here chapter 7, we haven't received any actual comments from the planning group since the January 23rd meeting. And so we're not anticipating any substantive changes. So we're finalizing that, and we'll include that in the IPP. In terms of updates, we'll provide those for the following chapters. So for chapter 4, just to recap, chapter 4 is the evaluation and results of the water needs analysis and secondary needs for water user groups and major water providers. And so needs are basically taking the supplies, subtracting demands, that gives you either a surplus or a need. And we have had to make a few changes to chapter 4. It's actually mainly as a result of basin county splits, just needing to make sure that we're distributing water appropriately. If a WUG sort of spans the boundaries of a particular county or a basin, we needed to kind of shift water around. And so by doing that, we end up needing to update chapter 4. So it will result in a few updates to the supplies, but they'll be very minor and very slight. So we'll update the tables and figures and text as needed to accommodate that. For chapter 5, as a recap, this is the evaluation and recommendation of water management strategies. It includes the identification of potentially feasible strategies, the evaluation of those, and the recommendation, which ones are recommended, which ones are alternative, and also includes the water conservation recommendations. And so we've taken all of that information and condensed it, not really condensed it, it's quite long, into 3 subchapters. We've organized it into 3 subchapters. 5.1 is the potentially feasible water management strategies. 5.2 is the actual water management strategy evaluations. And 5.3 is the water conservation information and recommendations. So for 5.1, the changes I'm anticipating making is updating any justifications in the chapter. If there are particular water user groups who have needs, we have to identify which strategies are potentially feasible and which are not potentially feasible. And if there are certain categories of strategies that were identified as not being potentially feasible for a particular entity, we must include a justification. So like, if it's county other, what is the justification for not including a drought management strategy? And the answer is County Other is a dispersed water user group, and it's difficult to enact outside irrigation restrictions on people who live in rural areas and aren't connected to a like utility or an official water provider. So that sort of thing. And then for chapter 5.2, the changes we're anticipating making, so 5.2 is sort of broken out into, there's like a preamble of 5.2 that provides the methodology used to evaluate the strategies. And then each subsection after that, 5.2.1, 5.2.2 is representative of water management strategies. So like 5.2.1 is municipal conservation. 5.2.2 is non-municipal water conservation, that sort of thing. So we are anticipating some revisions to water management strategies that we are going to summarize in the subsequent slides. And then for 5.3, water conservation information recommendations, we're not anticipating any revisions. So in general, the water management strategy revisions are related to some of the groundwater allocations. So as I mentioned, we changed some of the supplies. And so that results in changes to the remaining amount of groundwater availability that is available for strategies. So those changes result in minor changes to yields for the different groundwater strategies, the cost tables, and in DB27. And so then to resolve unmet needs, we are adding water management strategies to accommodate or to resolve those unmet needs. And one of those ways that we're resolving some of the unmet needs is by adding a, quote, entity purchase to meet shortages, so that an entity would be purchasing from another entity with a surplus. And that's summarized on this slide. So the entity purchase to meet shortages, so some water user groups will include this new strategy, and it's not necessarily a new strategy. They'll be including a strategy. It's the same process and approach that we used in the 2021 plan, whereby an entity who would otherwise have an unmet need would purchase water from another entity with a surplus. And we made sure to get agreement from both parties, with both the purchaser and the seller, to include this strategy. And so, for example, Crystal Clear Sud will be purchasing from GBRA and 3,000 acre feet in 2040 for 2060, and in 2070, 4,000 acre feet, and in 2080, 6,000 acre feet. So those volumes would completely resolve their unmet needs for these particular entities. And so another item that we're updating is the language included for MAG limited and MAG constrained water management strategies. So at the January 23rd meeting, I presented proposed language that would be included in the available yield section of certain strategies that are limited by groundwater availability. And so some of the strategy sponsors requested changes to the language. So instead of including this new language that I presented in January, actually using language from the 2016 Regional Water Plan, because that was very comprehensively fleshed out, and the sponsors were generally more comfortable with it. And so we pulled that language in, updated it as needed, and then we've put that into strategies where it has been requested for inclusion. And in terms of the terminology, initially we had used the terms requested yield and available yield to indicate this is what the sponsor requested to include for this particular strategy, but the available yield is what we're actually able to accommodate due to groundwater availability. And so we changed the terminology to reflect the terminology used in the 2016 plan, which is basically envisioned yield versus MAG constrained yield. And so some of the sponsors have requested inclusion of cost estimates for both the envisioned yield and the MAG constrained yield. And that is because of the differences in the cost tables for unit costs. So for both the envisioned and the MAC-constrained yield costing, we size the infrastructure to accommodate the fully requested yield. So if it was like a 10 MGD water treatment plant for 10,000 acre feet or something, the sizing was the same for both the MAC constrained and the envisioned. So it would be a 10 MGD plant for both. It's just that when it comes down to the unit costs are basically the cost divided by the volume of the available yield. And so the unit cost is really where those changes are seen. So if you are a sponsor of a water management strategy that is MAC constrained and you would like cost estimates for both the envisioned and the MAC constrained yields, let us know, we can throw it in there. So this is a slide that shows that proposed language that is already being included in some of these water management strategies. And the blue text is showing the slight changes that we've made to the language. So under the available yield section of every strategy, this cycle what we've done is included a preamble consistently among the strategies where it just says the strategies planned for completion by X decade with a yield with X volume, and then see this table. So we're still doing that, and the new language introduces the terminology of the envisioned yield and the MAC constraint yield, and then shows that in the table of the yields and the implementation decades. And then this language that's shown here, yes.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I'm really sorry I didn't come to the staff board group meeting last week, because I would have liked to address this issue on this language regarding the MAG limitations. And I just wanted to share with the group, from GMA 13's perspective and of GCDs that will be permitting much of this water. It's important to note, and I brought it up, that GMA 13 is evaluating a new GAM, groundwater availability plan, which will generate the MAGs based upon the DFCs, which feeds to the process here. But in the 2011 plan, the 2016 plan, the 2021 plan, and the 2026 plan, this plan, the GAM for the Carrizo Aquifer in GMA 13 was created in 2004. So we're using a GAM that was created in 2004 for the last 4 planning cycles. So in 2023, and this is just for everyone's information because I want to share with you the challenge that the groundwater districts are going to face with regards to this GAM. And I think it's significant because it affects these MAG limited issues and ultimately things that are in the regional plan. But in 2023, after the 2021 plan, the Texas Water Development Board took on the development of a 2023 revised GAM for the Carrizo and Sparta aquifers in the southern portion, basically all of the Carrizo south on the southern. In 2023, when that GAM came out, it was reviewed by the GMA 13 members, the districts, and they had some challenges with it because it was radically different from the 2004 plan in that specifically transmissivities were kind of off the chart. And so many of the groundwater districts were quite concerned that this plan, the model had changed so much, especially when those transmissivities did not compare to the actual pump test and all of the technical data. So the Water Development Board allowed the GMA 13 to initiate a 2024 GAM revision, which Dr. Bill Hutchinson worked on. Well, that 2024 revision is under intense scrutiny right now for some major problems that we have with it. And so and that was the deadline for comments on the 2024 GAM that I spoke of earlier being due today, 2024. On February 20th today. point I'm making here is we're not likely to have a new GAM that's effectively approved by GMA 13 for use by the groundwater districts until the 2031 plan. So we will actually be utilizing GAM information, water district information, water availability from 25 years ago. And so the water districts are having to take upon themselves to utilize, to get approval for allowing their own revisions and models specifically for permitting purposes within their management plans. So there's a lot of, I caution the group, our region, from putting so much faith in these water availability models based upon GAMs that were created essentially in 2004 and are being radically changed today. And we haven't even gone through the new DSC process yet. So it's just, I throw it out there as a comment on this level. And like I say, I should have addressed this with you at the staff work group meeting. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I just thought it was important for the group to understand the challenges the individual districts are having with the GMA 13 specific to the groundwater availability model. And for example, the Evergreen District, Wilson, Karnes, Atascosa, and Frio County engaged in Terra for the last year and to evaluate the revised GAM. And it's going to have some significant issues that we're going to have to address, but that'll be up to the Water Development Board and our discussion with the Water Development Board regarding this. So that's a little bit of flavor that I'd like to share when we talk about this language and these water management strategies and partitioning. It's kind of like garbage in, garbage out. And the water districts are going to be on the front line for permitting these projects at some point, and transport rates, et cetera, all of that. So if anybody has any comments?
What's the percent difference you've seen between the two models?
Well, Aaron is our general manager for Evergreen, so.
So the difference that you can evaluate it quite a few different ways, but the transmissivity values are order length. So there is some significant issues.
As well as specific yields that were used in the model. So we have engaged a very serious effort, technical effort, with Steve Young and Tara to evaluate those specific details and technical aspects of that model, along with our own pump testing data, transmissivity data across our region. But I know the Winter Garden, of course, is going to have significant issues as well, because it has a dramatic effect on how the model was constructed in the western, certainly the southwestern portion of the GMA. So keep in mind that at this point in time, the water districts are faced with a very grave challenge because of the demands for providing water availability tied to DFCs, specifically for regional water plans that have to be funded by SWIFT. And the Texas Water Development Board uses that data and uses the plan and assumes the water is available. We've got water availability models that haven't really, or not utilizing accurate information or even the best available science. And it's on the groundwater district to participate and fund efforts to revise the GAM, all tied to approval by the Water Development Board. So,
Assuming you say order of magnitude is not too better.
well, if you're overestimating transmissivities and yields,
Yeah, if you're overstating it, now your reality is something.
but there's a link then tied back to the DFCs. You know, the DFCs generate the MAG. So that's going to be a question.
But it's not just that it's one parameter, it's multiple parameters, and it's even the structure of the model and how the layers are represented, which has a lot of localized impacts as well. It's a very complex issue.
Anyway, that's my comment on the record, and I'd be more than happy to share after the meeting, just
This is Mr. Ramos. I have a comment or just a response. I appreciate that, Daryl, I'm sorry, with your responses. But is it possible? I mean, I don't want to say it basically the 13th hour. So, you know, I think this issue could have been addressed early on. We have subcommittee items on our agenda. Maybe moving forward, next time we have a subcommittee just to try to understand this better. Maybe create a subcommittee at the next planning session. I do know these plans, what's due with the GMAs and what's due with this, they're all out of sync, right? We're just trying to work with the best stuff that we have at this point. But I heard what you're saying, and I don't want to discount what you're saying. But certainly if somehow the next planning session, there's some type of subcommittee just kind of talks about this and addresses it, that way we're not waiting at the last minute to say there's this issue or possibility there's an issue, you know, just kind of address it early on for the next plan. Some of our own comments.
Can I ask a question really quick? Sure. Are you proposing any changes to this language?
I'm not.
Okay.
Proposing and that's
you're
what I'm
providing
saying. I'm not
context.
trying to throw a fly in the ointment here. But I can say we can't look at this plan as this planning body, can't look at this in a vacuum. But there has to be a recognition at some point that at the end of the day, the permittees that will come to the groundwater districts, you know, and request a permit for the production of water from the Carrizo Aquifer or the Sparta or the Wilcox in the middle. Really, it's the upper Wilcox and the Carrizo, which are this complex unit. But we think that there is no water availability model associated with the middle Wilcox. And I don't think it affects so much the middle Wilcox. It really is the Carrizo and the two upper Wilcox members that sandwich the Carrizo. And I think that you're exactly right. Now, this came about, it wasn't brought to the attention of the group so much because the revisions by GMA 13 of the 2023 model were not presented until this past fall. And so this language and this process was well underway. It's been underway, of course. But moving forward, it's going to be a heavy lift, I think, for all of us, for all of those intending on extracting water from the Carrizo Aquifer and Sparta in the south here, that the groundwater districts we're not operating with, we don't have consensus on a groundwater availability model yet, and that's still under. And so that sort of, it doesn't fit anywhere here, but it's got to be recognized. I mean, at the end of the day, when a permit comes in, it's going to be the permit applicant coming to the groundwater district, and we've developed a model, and it may be a totally separate model. It may be site-specific and dealing with drawdown. So there's ways that we're going to work around it, but recognize the process of simply taking the MAG, based on, from 2024, the GAM from 2004, with ripples of changes, little nits and noise for the DFCs here and there, generating new groundwater availability models, is wholly a lesson or an exercise in.
Yeah, and I appreciate the context, and I'm sure others here also appreciate that context, because this is something that we've been grappling with on the regional water planning side of things, about the interaction and the downstream effects, no pun intended, of what the Joint Groundwater Planning Group does, and in terms of developing those scams, and then how they are translated into modeled available groundwater, and that becomes the groundwater availability, and that becomes a very firm quantified ceiling of what we can work with. And that quantified ceiling is much lower in some cases than it was in the 2021 plan.
But in every one of our plans, we acknowledge that it's subject to permitting conditions of the district, and those permitting conditions may change. So there's the caveat, that we have to recognize, actually weight behind that caveat. Ultimately, you need to get a permit. It's going to come to the groundwater district, and all those details are going to be worked out. I'm talking about it from a higher level perspective in our planning. So thank you for this opportunity.
So
to,
Hand raised.
yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of comments from our online participants. One from Marissa Bruno just stated that this comment further supports our inclusion of unmet needs because of unavailable groundwater. And I know that Tim, you have your hand raised online. I'm happy to read your question, or if you want to unmute yourself and provide that.
Thank you. This is Tim Andrus. Regarding the previous two slides, I'll begin with asking the question, or at least it seemed to imply that this sort of language would only be included for certain water management strategies. The question is, will it be applied to all water management strategies that are MAG constrained?
Yeah, great question. So I think, I'm still kind of going through it. I think this language, and I'm very open to input here. I think this language could go into every water management strategy that is MAG limited, MAG constrained. In terms of the next slide, where it shows the costing tables for both the envisioned yield and for the MAG constrained yield, I think that's going to be up to water management strategy sponsors to request that. Because some people want it and some others don't really mind. So from that standpoint, I think having just this paragraph and this language at the front end of the available yield that introduces the terminology of envisioned yield and MAG constrained yield, I think that can and should be added to each of those strategies. It's just a matter of that costing, having both costing tables.
So to follow up, what would be give me an example of a reason to not include the two costing estimations?
Level of effort. It takes quite a bit of time. We must develop the UCMs for each phase. So some of these projects have 4 phases. So we have to do UCMs for 4 envisioned yields and 4 available yields. We've already done the available yields, and then pull it into the water management strategy evaluation, and then have a write-up about each individual one. So this request to include the language, these cost tables, this request came to us last week. So having additional cost tables for, I don't know, how many different strategies do we have that are MAG constrained? I mean, it takes quite a bit of time, and it's just not something that we were planning on doing for the IPP. But it's something we could add for the final, if you all choose to.
Okay. Well, I would think for any of those that, it's determined it's not feasible to calculate the MAG constrained cost estimates, or however you're describing that cost information. I think if nothing else, a note that, that wasn't performed due to some administrative constraint, whatever it is, would be appropriate in those instances. More importantly, though, my next comment has to do, I think it's previous slide 26. If you could, that final sentence there, maybe it's the final sentence. Oh yeah, it begins with if the MAG is increased during or after, et cetera. I'm curious to know if the group would entertain revising the word increase to revised or modified. Conceivably, MAGs can be reduced.
I think, we need to give you any direction on that? I mean, I feel like looking at a bunch of heads shaking up and down on that.
Okay, sure. I think I would probably, but yeah, if the MAG estimates are modified during or after the planning cycle, the planning group may use this plan to adjust the strategy supply volumes that are affected by the new MAG. Or revised MAG.
Was there an idea behind why the increase was put in there?
This was carried forward from the 26. So most of this language was carried forward from the 2016 plan, and I made minor revisions to make it more, to be applicable.
Yeah, it modified something like that.
Cool. And then if I can go back to Tim, your other comment about this field, or the costing tables. So the costing tables that we include are the MAG constrained yield costing tables. So again, both the MAC constrained yield and the envisioned yield costing, everything would be the same except for those unit costs. So the sizing is the same, it's just those unit costs. And so the existing language in these water management strategies includes a description of why the unit costs are different, because it's due to being based on the yield, and the reasoning why, basically.
Yep.
So there's already kind of a disclaimer explaining that.
I understand. I confused myself. I wrongly concluded that it would be the envisioned cost would be calculated for all projects. And so yeah, disregard that comment about making a special comment about why the second costing table is not present. Thank you. I misunderstood.
Thanks, Tim.
There's also another comment by Diane Wasenick online. She just stated that she does not recall the Regional Water Planning Group making a decision to modify the costing to show what the project would cost per unit if there were no MAC problem. Seems to me that we should be realistic about amounts of water and costs.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, the TWDB requires us to do basically the MAC constraint yield. It's not that terminology used, but we're required to do those unit costs based on the available yield, and so that's why we're including it.
Just a comment on the modeling issue. We probably come at it from a different angle than Carol does, but we do have some concerns on the model as well, so I think we'll be part of that discussion on this discussion.
Yeah, I think Mr. Ramos has suggested that maybe a subcommittee going forward might be a bad idea to look at that and bring it to the group. I think I mentioned last time in GME 9, we're watching concerns. We haven't seen our model yet, so we expect it to change, but we don't know what it's going to do to us yet.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that's a great idea for a subcommittee going forward. But I would say SOG has been a very active participant in Jamaica. So there is a lot of, all the players. There's I don't see animosity. I think everyone's trying to get to the right number with respect to the parameters that we're allowed to work in. Given the public nature and the varied nature around what
Mr. Ramos brought up a good point about being out of timing, out of sync, So how long is it taking to get to from the time the project kicked off to now that you're seeing?
Well, I think you have to recognize that this pertains to the regional water planning cycle. And so the the horses run down the road a long ways for 2026.
Oh, yeah.
But for 2031,
Right.
we should be in a position to have, concrete data and approval or consensus on these models. And even the districts themselves may generate their own models in the within the next year or two, which will be useful for permitting standpoints. But the hierarchy of the groundwater availability models needs to flow down to groundwater needs. And so that process certainly will be available for 2031 and will be a very active subcommittee participating by everybody.
I'm wondering if there's any value in revisiting and updating any information 3 to 4 years before we do that.
Well, the 2031 plan will be done by 2029.
Right, which is
So it'll be in the next 2 years. In the next year, yeah, we have to start working within the next 2 years. But I think it's about a 2-year process here with GMA 13. A 2-year process to get to the point where the water development board has approved the water management plans. The district management plans for the individual groundwater districts, which includes the district's position with respect to the management of groundwater, the DFCs, and all of those things, which have to come out of an improved model. We brought this up. GMA 13 is dealing with this issue now because of the drastic changes that occurred as a result. So we're looking at model results here based upon stuff that we know wasn't necessarily accurate or within the constraints of our data within the district So it'll get fixed. I think there's a very cooperative spirit with all of the groundwater districts. But GMA 13 is not alone in this. This is happening across the state. But you make 15, others have 16.
The conversation should be started off. This particular one.
Probably will be ultimately because the Water Development Board has to approve any model used by a GCD.
Because
Because
it's over allocated, or not over allocated, over restricted by us. I think the Water Development Board will look at that.
and I think the Water Development Board is going to be involved in everything.
So I don't know if we have set up a subcommittee or anything, but obviously it's going through the Water Development Board, so it seems like the purpose of this plan. I think that just the conversation should start.
We're gonna agenda item later, we're gonna do the subcommittee at that time, but we can, move on with your presentation.
Sure. I'm sorry, can we actually ask about that subcommittee? Are you talking about subcommittee for this cycle or next cycle?
I think it's, we might form it now, but it would really be looking at that next cycle.
Well, that concludes my presentation about chapter 5. Or if I move on to chapter 6. Okay. So at the January meeting, we presented an overview of chapter 6 and preliminary results. And those preliminary results were mainly about the environmental impacts and the impacts to of the strategies on key water quality parameters and voluntary redistribution of water and effects on navigation and so forth. Today's meeting, we're presenting the results of the cumulative effects analysis. And so this analysis is derived mainly from a requirement that if there's a region that has stream segments designated by the legislature as having, quote, unique ecological value, then the planning groups must perform a quantifiable evaluation of the impact of the entire plan on those segments. And so, as a result of that, the cumulative effects analysis was born, and it looks at the impact of implementing all the strategies by doing this long-term simulation of the natural hydrological processes and how they affect the different natural resources. And so, I would also like to take a moment and acknowledge and express my appreciation for a few other members of our team who are on the call that I didn't know that they were on earlier. Brent Kane of Flagging Beach and Laura Rodriguez Lozada. They did so much work and made so many sacrifices to do this groundwater flux evaluation so that we could hand it off to Richard for his water availability modeling. And my sincerest thanks. So now I'll request Richard come up and give an overview and results of the cumulative effects analysis.
All right, thank you, Lauren. What we have here is a framework for the combination of our groundwater and surface water models for this evaluation. You can see those top gold boxes. Those are our aquifers and the water management strategies for groundwater in each aquifer. Those are included in this evaluation. And if you go to the next level down, we have our dams. And then finally we get down to those hexagons. That's our changes to the stream flow contribution, either reduction of the amount coming into the stream or maybe some more gains coming into the stream. Those groundwater numbers are then combined. If you go down to the next level where it says baseline river basin WAM, that's our water availability model that includes all the permitted surface water rights, reservoirs in our river basins. And then we look for the in-stream flow and changes to the estuary inflows. So that's our baseline framework out to 2080. And then A second evaluation is done kind of in the middle where it says surface water management strategies. We do a second run to look at the water rights changes that are associated with water management strategies in 18 years. So the surface water changes in environmental flows are modeled and measured at 7 locations in this analysis. These are all in the Guadalupe San Antonio River Basin. We didn't have any meaningful strategies that would change flows in the Nueces Basin, so that's not included in the analysis. We have those first 3 are in the Guadalupe before the confluence with the San Antonio River. And then we have the next 4 and 5, those are on the San Antonio River, and then the last 2, those are below the confluence and going towards the estuary. So the next series of slides are at each of those 7 locations. We have 2 graphs. The one on the left, that's looking at our 50th percentile flow, so that's our monthly median flow every month during our historical repetition of hydrology. And these are again out to 2080 water management strategy conditions. And then our figure on the right, this is looking not just at the 50th percentile, but looking at all the percentiles and not looking at specific months. So this is looking just across all months and all percentiles. We're trying to get a sense of the long-term changes to stream flow, if any. And we have on our graph on the right, we have a blue and a light blue line that's with and without the regional water management plan in there. And then that gold line, that's our environmental flow standards, the in-stream flow requirements that were adopted by TCQ after the Senate Bill 3 process more than a decade ago now. And what we're looking there to see if our stream flows with and without the plan have any deviations or drop below those in-stream flow standards. This is the Comal River at New Braunfels. There's not much going on here in the model other than there's a little bit of groundwater flux change upstream of this location, but generally there's no impact here. It's the same with and without the plan. This is the next location, San Marcos River at Luling. Same story here. There's no surface water management strategy, and there's just some groundwater flux contribution here from the Trinity that's changing, but it's very minor and it's really undetectable here. We go down to Victoria, so this is further down in the basin. Upstream of this location, we have groundwater flux changes from both Trinity, Carrizo, and Gulf Coast aquifers. And we have the upstream location for water secure, that's their GBRA strategy. It involves a diversion point near Gonzales. There's, again, not much change here. One reason for that is the upstream diversion point in water secure. It involves the GBRA's Mid-Basin Project Water Right Permit 12378. That's included in the baseline because it's an existing water right now. Previously in the past plan, it wasn't an existing water right, it was still pending, so it was only in the with plan simulation, but now it's in both. So we don't see much change here either. Shifting over to the San Antonio River, this location, San Antonio River near Falls City, we just have some groundwater flux that's affecting this gauge, but again, it's very minimal. Everything's above the environmental flow standards with very little change. Go ahead. We have one new water right that's simulated upstream of this location. So this would be the SCTRWPG Siesta project on Sibling Creek. That's a new water right that's only in the with plan simulation. But the effects are pretty small here. There's a a little bit of change in the median monthly flows and a slight decrease in the overall graph on the right, but everything again is above the environmental flow standard. And now we're below the confluence of the San Antonio and Guadalupe rivers. We don't have an environmental in-stream flow standard here. So these graphs are generally for informational purposes. We don't have a benchmark to measure against here. We do have one for the estuary for cumulative volumes that I'll show in just a minute. We have, everything's basically upstream of this location. So water secure and the lower basin new appropriations water management strategy. So the lower basin new appropriations is a pending application, so that's only in the with plan simulation, and that contributes mostly to those darker blue bars and darker blue line coming down. Moving a little bit further downstream, so this is just moving down from the saltwater dam down to the estuary, looking at the individual months and the overall flow across time. Same story as the previous slide I just showed you. And this is where we do have some metrics at the bottom of the basin. So this was the estuary. And the way the environmental flow standards are set up, it looks at cumulative volumes for 2 seasons. And this is the spring season that consists of March, April, and May, the 3-month total. And the total volume is then categorized into either what's called spring 1, 2, 3, all the way through 6. And those levels are shown in that graphic with the shaded colorations. And our 2 lines running through those color shaded areas, that's our with and without plan simulation results, so that you can see where the flows sort of fall within those categories of 3-month spring inflows. And then over on the right, that box, that shows the statutory requirements for assessing new water rights. And what we see here is when we do the cumulative impacts analysis and look at all the water rights and all the changes, we don't see any deviations outside of the parameters set by a requirement at TCQ. This is the next season, summer. So similar story here. It's a 3-month look. It's July, August, and September. That 3-month total is then evaluated against multiple different levels, summer 1, 2, 3, all the way through 7. Same story here. Looking up at the changes to flow to the bay for the summer season, they're all within the standards. So it looks like everything is okay with that as well. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them. Somebody have their hand raised online?
That's still left over from earlier.
Oh, okay.
You're good. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay. So, also included in Chapter 6 is a summary of unmet needs. This is a table that shows the summary of unmet needs by water user group, sector, or use type. And we're showing unmet needs for municipal uses starting in 2060, and irrigation uses, manufacturing, mining, and steam electric in all decades of the plan. There are no unmet needs shown for livestock. At the January 23rd meeting, I presented a table of 19 municipal water user groups that had been identified as having potential unmet needs, and the majority of those have been resolved. And there's the next slide, I'll describe how these different water user groups, or how the unmet needs for those ones have been resolved. So there are now 5 water user groups with unmet needs that are unlikely to be resolved in the plan. And they include Bernie and County Other Comal, County Other Guadalupe, County Other Hayes, and County Other Kendall. All of the unmet needs began in 2016. So these are the actions that we took to resolve the unmet needs for the entities that were presented at the January meeting. So for Bernie, we were able to provide additional strategies for them, but the strategies still do not resolve their unmet needs. So they will continue to have unmet needs. For Canyon Lake Water Service, Texas Water Company, their unmet need was resolved through an entity purchase. For the Carrizo Hill WSC, that's when we reallocated the supplies across basin county splits. For Clearwater States, Texas Water Company, that one is an additional fresh groundwater strategy. For Crystal Clear SUD, it's an entity purchase from a few different entities. For Cuero, again, we've reallocated supplies among the basin county splits. For East Central SUD, an entity purchase. For Elmendorf, an entity purchase plus new fresh groundwater strategy. For Fort St. Houston, we added an additional Edwards Transfers water management strategy. For Goforth, it was an entity purchase. For South Buda WCID 1, an entity purchase. Actually, entity purchases for South Buda WCID 1, Texas State, the Oaks WSC, and for Wimberley. And shown there are the 4 county others that we have now been able to identify strategies to resolve those needs as they're too significant in volume. And for County Other Victoria, we were able to resolve that with a new fresh groundwater strategy. So, if we have municipal unmet needs, the board will consider approving a regional water plan with unmet municipal needs if there's justification. And the justification has to include these 4 points. And so, in draft chapter 6 that we provided to you all, we included much more fleshed out language for each individual WUG with unmet needs. There are 5 of those WUGs that have unmet needs. We have 5 subsections. And so what I will present in the slide, the next slide, is just kind of a generic language that we used for some of them. So it is not inclusive of everything that we wrote because it's a lot. So the 4 topics, items that must be addressed are: 1, documentation that all potentially feasible strategies were considered to meet the need, including drought management. 2, explanation as to why additional conservation and/or drought management strategies were not recommended to address the need. And then 3, descriptions of how, in the event of a repeat of the drought record, the WUG associated with the unmet need will ensure the public health, safety, and welfare in each planning decade with an unmet need. And 4, explanation as to whether there may be occasion prior to the development of the next IPP to amend the plan to address all or a portion of the unmet municipal need. So we made sure that the language that's included in chapter 6, it hits every single one of those points in order. So this is a wall of text for Bernie. The first paragraph is essentially saying where Bernie is and what we did to try and resolve these unmet needs, and a discussion of what the potentially feasible strategies were that were considered, but the volume of those strategies is not enough. It's not great enough to resolve the unmet needs. They still have them, beginning in 2070. And so then the next one is how to, explanation as to why conservation and drought management could not be added to resolve the unmet needs. And this next paragraph is essentially saying that we already developed conservation and drought management for Bernie, and we use methodology selected by you all that is realistic and includes achievable goals, and it would not be reasonable, realistic, or achievable to include additional conservation or drought management because it would require basically a 40% reduction in drought management instead of the 10% that we're including. So last cycle we did 5% drought drought management reduction. This cycle we're doing 10. And so in order to meet Bernie's needs, we'd have to reduce them by 40%. So in the drought management costing tool doesn't even allow you to go 40. The maximum is 30%. So that's why it's not feasible to add more conservation and drought management. And then what would they do in case of a repeat of the drought record to ensure public health and safety? And the answer is that in discussions with Bernie, they indicate that the regional water plans, water demand projections exceed their internal planning data. And they believe that they will meet their needs. And so because Bernie's planning information indicates they have sufficient supplies, they've elected not to include additional strategies in the plan. In case of repeat of the drought record, Bernie responded that they will impose additional drought restrictions to meet public health, safety, and welfare needs during each planning decade with unmet needs. And then that last statement, number 4, was, will there be an occasion to amend the plan before the next IPP if we can resolve these unmet needs? And so we make the statement, should Bernie provide new project information, the plan may be amended to address unmet municipal needs before adoption of the next initially prepared plan, which is anticipated to be in 2030. I'm sorry, who has a question? Oh, Diane. Go ahead, Diane.
Thank you. I mean, I guess you've answered my question with your statements, but my question was, since I know some water providers in Hays County and other hill country providers have banned outdoor water use this year because of the drought, some of them for very long periods, but I guess that's still not an accepted practice to deal with water shortages in the plan, since our regional board only agreed to use 10% reduction in drought management.
Well, we also can include entity-specific, if an entity requests a different percentage other than 10%, we could include that. I think in the case of Bernie, they didn't necessarily request a new strategy for additional drought management. And again, I think that the amount of reduction necessary for Bernie isn't necessarily realistic. And so that's one of the reasons why we chose to include this. And they also just requested to have unmet needs.
Well, in our next plan, I'd be interested to know how much reduction the ones in, say, Wimberley and other hill country communities that have been on this kind of restriction this year, how much they actually saved. I'll try to find that out.
That would be interesting. Are there any questions about this one?
Laura?
Oh, yes, sir.
So Bernie says that their own internal planning data indicates that we're not going to have an unmet need. Are they required, or are we required to provide any of that data, or is this the statement good enough?
Yeah, so, great question. So that data, the water demands and population water demand projections, right? That was chapter 2. We went through extensive efforts. I mean, how many meetings did we hold? Like 12 different meetings to discuss population water demand projections in 2021, 2022, 2023. So, and we also sent surveys out to everyone, including Bernie, requesting input on it. And I don't recall if we got any specific input on Bernie, but if we had, we would have made the request, right? So when we started going through this effort to coordinate with them, they believe that they're essentially the population water demand projections are using a boundary that is inaccurate of their CCN. And so we provided them resources about the methodology, about the population water demand projections, and that in the next cycle, they have an opportunity, actually they have an opportunity right now to make requests for revisions that could impact the next cycle's water demand population projections by requesting a revision of the public water system boundaries through this public water system data viewer that the board has this like open call for edits to it. So we provided those resources to them too.
But we're not required, and they're not required to provide their conflicting data in this plan. We don't have to put in the plan saying, this is the data that they provided to show why they're going to allow an unmet need.
I don't believe we're required to do that. I'm not
All
sure
right.
if it's for sure.
So their statement that we have conflicting data is sufficient. We just put it in there. Okay.
If no questions on burning, I'll move on to county other. Again, this language here is basically a generalized language, and we modified this language for each specific county other look, based on where they're currently getting their supplies, based on what population increase they're planning to see between 2030 and 2080. And then for Hays County in particular, we included additional information that was provided to us from the Hays Trinity Groundwater Conservation District about how groundwater availability is very limited. So this is essentially, the first paragraph is similar to the burning one, where it gives an overview of the WUG and where they are and the projected increase in water demands. And then the next paragraph is talking about the potentially feasible strategies that were considered and which ones were ultimately included in the plan as a recommended strategy. And then it makes a statement, however, even with those strategies, we still can't resolve unmet needs for this WUG. And then the next paragraph is about why municipal conservation and drought management, additional volumes or additional, like greater volumes of those strategies, why those weren't included to meet the needs. And basically, again, it's that the yields of the conservation strategy were developed using the methodology, and they reflect realistic and achievable goals, and that additional conservation and drought management strategies aren't recommended, mainly because it's infeasible for county other. Because county other, there's also the statement in the paragraph before about how county other is representative of rural independent residences and also municipal WUGs that fall under the threshold of having 100 acre-feet per year of annual retail sales. And so they have this dispersed nature of, that makes it so that it would be very difficult and rather infeasible to develop these aggressive conservation and drought management efforts to meet all of the unmet needs for county other. Because again, those population water demand projections, it experiences this astronomical increase around 2050. So the next paragraph is basically saying additional strategies weren't included because, and this is where the Hays County one differs significantly, because remaining MAC availability from existing sources isn't sufficient enough to meet demands between 2060 and 2080. And also, it would be cost prohibitive to develop large-scale strategies that could resolve or meet unmet needs for county other because of its dispersed nature. Meeting public health, safety, and welfare needs during a repeat of the drought record may include implementing new or existing emergency interconnects with other water providers or purchasing hauled water to disrupt water systems. And then the number 4 requirement, should small water providers or other entities provide new project information, the regional water plan may be amended to address unmet municipal needs before adoption of the next initially prepared plan, anticipated to be in 2030. So for the Hays County other, I can go ahead and pull up, bear with me, what that description was. Okay. It's basically this paragraph that I'm showing on the screen. Nope, it's this Additional strategies were not included in the plan for County Other Hays because remaining MAG availabilities from existing supply sources, the Trinity Aquifer and Edwards VSC, are not sufficient to meet needs between 2060 and 2080. Based on discussions with the Hays Trinity Groundwater Conservation District, volumes of groundwater available for new or amended permits is extremely limited and expected to reach zero before 2036. Asterisk right there, I'm gonna come back to that. Hays County is split between Region L and the Lower Colorado region, Region K. Based on interregional coordination, the Region K portion of County Other Hays will also demonstrate unmet needs in the 2026 Lower Colorado Regional Water Plan. So, I sent this over to Charlie Flatton with the Hays Trinity Groundwater Conservation District, and he requested a revision to that term. Instead of it saying we'll reach zero by 2036, he's asking for this to be changed to before. The version that I sent to you all the version of this that I sent to you all, it had the term by 2036, and now it's changed to before. That's all. So, anyway, so that is what we're planning to provide here for the unmet needs justification, unless you all have other suggestions. So, other updates to the chapter. We're planning to update the unmet needs justification to include that term before, not by, for the Hays County Other. We may need to update the unmet needs volumes slightly, so for consistency with DB 27, once we get all that input. And then we are going to update the environmental analysis narrative. So the version of chapter 6 that we sent had all of the correct scores in the tables, so the narrative needs to get updated. So we'll do that. Chapter 9, this is the implementation in comparison to the previous regional water plan. And it includes all of those different topics, which I discussed previously. This is just an at the January meeting, so I discussed it. And then this is an overview of the implementation survey that we sent out. And then this is just a comparison between the 2021 plan and the 2026 plan for each of these different categories. So municipal demand projections, and it's showing an increase in demand projections between the 2021 plan and the 2026 plan. And then the next graph is non-uni demand projections. We're showing like a slightly reduced demand projections for the 2026 plan in the earlier decades, but then an increase in the later decades. Also of note is that this planning horizon shifted over one decade, so instead of being 2020 through 2070, it's now 2030 through 2080. So there's not going to be a dark gray bar for the 2080 decade because the previous plan only went through 2070. And so this is a summary of the groundwater availability. This is overall for the entire region, showing the differences in the increases between the 2026 plan and the 2021 plan. And then with surface water availability, those differences there. And then municipal water supplies, this is showing those differences, showing we're increasing municipal water supplies. Instead of 500,000, it's about 650,000 acre feet per year. So it's showing that all these different water user groups are implementing water management strategies to increase their supplies. And then non-municipal water supplies has also increased. Our municipal water needs, what we're showing is, again, this astronomical increase beginning of the 2060 decade. And then for non-municipal water needs, shown there for the two different planning cycles. So this is the number of water management strategies serving more than one water user group. And this is to address a requirement that we must provide an assessment of the progress towards regionalization. And it's a comparison of the 2026 and 2021 plans. So since adoption of the 2021 Regional Water Plan, 3 of the 19 strategies identified as serving more than one entity have been implemented. And generally, cooperation and collaboration among water user groups is encouraged for the purpose of achieving economies of scale. And there are several strategies within regional that have multiple water users who benefit from them, like the UASC, LGC, and SCTRWPG projects. And then the EAHCP is an example of local partnerships and coordination that provide an overall benefit. And then that's all for chapter 9. Chapter 10, brief overview. Again, interregional coordination efforts with regions P and K. And we also corresponded with chairs and regional water planning group liaisons. This whole chapter is just meant to be an overview of how we accomplished outreach and increased awareness. And so we also summarize all of the different meetings and work groups that were developed for Region L for this cycle. And so we had a work group for groundwater availabilities over on the far left side, and we met one time in April of 2024. And then we had the Policy and Legislative Recommendations Committee, and we had 7 meetings there, beginning last year until this year. For population and water demands, this is what I was talking about earlier, about how much we coordinated with people on revising the population and water demands. So we had 11 meetings on that. And then we also held rural community outreach meetings. We had 4 of those. And then staff work group meeting, we have those about 1.5 to 2 weeks before every regional water planning group meeting. And so we've had 16 of those. And then we've had 17 regional water planning group meetings. So we've had a total of 56 meetings since 2021. And then all of these different methods that we've done outreach, surveys, webinar, more surveys, emails to solicit new water management strategies to individual people, more surveys, requests for drought contingency plans. We sent out rural outreach letters. And then we established this new work group, the Rural and Community Outreach Work Group. And it was meant to discuss water management strategies to benefit rural communities and entities. And what arose from that was developing irrigation conservation strategies and irrigation drought management strategies. And I think just increased awareness in general. And also we compiled a list of, the board compiled a list of 122 entities within the planning area that meet the rural political subdivision definition, which is basically county other. And we took that list and prepared letters to send to these rural entities, providing general information about the regional water planning process and about how to engage with the planning process, additional resources, and then we also provided a request for submitting water management strategies. So we've really covered all the bases over the last 4 years. And that's the end of that agenda item.
Good, so that moves us to agenda item number 8, consideration and approval regarding the initially prepared plan, 2026 South Central Texas Regional Water Plan. And then 3 items, you're gonna bring them up on each slide.
I've got an observation. Can I ask a question? This is Mr. Ramos. Y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Lauren, with regards to the WUGs and the counties, private utilities are not required to report, because I heard, Charlie saying that Northern Hayes County, the water user group, are they counted or not counted? So can you just give me a rundown? Are private utilities not required to be part of this process? Because I do see Canyon Lake, which stepped up. I do see Camino Real, which is another private entity. So what's the discrepancy? Are they allowed to, or are they not doing it, or what's going on?
Yeah, great question. So everyone is allowed to coordinate with us and become engaged with the regional water planning process. It's not required, but is encouraged. And generally, when I stood up here and interviewed with y'all back in 2021, one of the things that I said, and I believe, is that the value that this plan has is based on the engagement and getting as much outreach and awareness as possible, getting as many stakeholders involved. And I think we've done that. And so, when it comes to those private utilities, a lot of times they're smaller. A lot of times they fall under that threshold, and so they fall under county other. And especially in Hays County, even though Hays County is very, it's highly populated, there are lots of very small water utilities that are in that area, and a lot of them fall underneath that threshold, and so they're just kind of lumped into county other. We still compile all the information we can from them, we still reach out to them, and we still encourage them to participate. And we don't treat them any differently than a nonprofit water utility or government, utility.
Okay, because I think my example, I guess Charlie's probably more familiar with this one. Whatever utility was pumping all that water up in northern Hays County, I mean, I don't know how large they were, but I would think, if we could make some type of recommendation from this regional group, is that any private utility that's a certain size should be mandated to be part of this process. Because, I mean, you have private utilities that have stepped up right now, that are doing it. So I don't know whether we need to revisit this, because when we start looking at GAMs, looking at GFCs, looking at this, and all of a sudden you still have these little groups, or whatever groups they are, they're not even being recorded here, taking all this water or not planning accordingly, we have a problem. So the plan's not as well as it should be. I just wanted to make that observation as we see these numbers and as we hear these issues and this, these private utilities, again, I can point at Aqua. I've seen Aqua because Aqua's near me in County Line. I think Aqua's pretty big. I don't see Aqua in anywhere in Regional.
Do you mean Aqua Texas or Aqua WSC? Because they're two different.
Not Aqua WC, Aqua Texas.
Okay. Yeah. So Aqua Texas, they fall under county other, and part of that is because Aqua Texas is the company who owns all of these different discrete public water systems. So all of those different public water systems, they all fall underneath the 100 acre foot per year threshold. And so, I mean, perhaps when they're combined, they may be above that threshold, that they could be considered as a water user group. But in that particular instance, they all fall below that. We did coordinate with them.
But it's like a conglomerate. They're all part of one entity. They're just basically separated out. So they're getting past a lot of this reporting or being part of the process. Just an observation. To me, that doesn't make sense.
And that could potentially be something that we add to the next cycle with Chapter 8 as a recommendation to the planning group, to the regional, so Texas Water Development Board or the ledge.
But aren't there permitted groundwater? I mean, their yields are caught up in the methodology just because the entity isn't. I mean, their water supplies or sources are.
Right. We still, even though they're county other, we still reach out to them and request surveys from them for each of their, public water systems, about their supplies. We ask information about their demands, their DCPs. We coordinate with the groundwater conservation districts to get their permits so that in case they don't respond to our surveys, we have something else that we can look at and compile. And we compile it all and it falls under county other.
Do you feel like we have a blind spot? Unrelated to the MAG scams and all the other conversations that we had. On this very narrowly specific issue, do we have a blind spot in terms of the planning process? Because I don't want to go down a regulatory process. That's not what we're doing. And these folks aren't eligible for the financing that we are. So I just want to be sure that, is there an appropriate space here if there is a blind spot? And we can punt that question for the next time.
I think Hays County is particularly tricky because of all of the different public water systems, and they change hands very frequently. And so it's difficult to have, we have this contact log, right? And it's difficult to have the most up-to-date contact information for each of them. And so a non-regulatory opportunity, I think, to increase participation with Hays County would be for your water utility, if your water utility is in that area, encouraging them to be engaged with the process, encouraging them to come to the regional water planning group meetings, encourage them to respond to our surveys with accurate data. I think that could help us kind of unwind everything that's going on in Hays County in particular. And as the population continues to increase in growth and everything along that I-35 corridor, we're going to continue running into that. I mean, Hays County's on the front lines of it, but it's going to extend to Caldwell, Boulder, Comal counties. So that would be helpful, I think, for future cycles.
Diane had a comment online regarding this as well. Diane, do you want to share with the group or do you want me to read it out?
Diane, are you on mute?
I'll just read out, she said that Aqua is just a bad actor. We, as a planning group, cannot control them. However, the PUC is working on that, and David Baker's group just won their protest against the Aqua Texas request to PUC for a rate increase.
I'm gonna hear that.
Is there any other discussion before I go back to the slide about the next steps? Okay. So, next steps. Adopt the initially prepared plan today. Then we'll make any other additional non-substantive edits to the plan, make DB27 updates. We'll make any updates you'll tell us to. And then we'll prepare the deliverables package and submit it to the Texas Water Development Board by March 3rd. And then we will prepare for the public hearing to present the IPP and receive public comments. And the prepare for the public hearing, that is a topic of discussion, also in this agenda item. So then, after the public hearing, we will receive comments from the public, from other agencies and Texas Water Development Board. We'll compile all those comments. We'll prepare draft responses to those comments. We'll present them to you all at the August meeting. And then between the August meeting and the October meeting, we will make those necessary edits to the plan and finalize any of the responses to the comments. And we'll present those to you in October, where you will then adopt the final plan. And then we will submit the final plan by October 20th. Lots of different steps. Just wanted to give you guys outline where we're going in 2025. So, for the public hearings, we wanted to talk to you all about where we're going, what we want to do with public hearings. So, the Texas Water Development Board requires, at a minimum, one in-person public hearing to present the IPP and to receive public comment and oral testimony. They also require that we publish public notice of the IPP with the public hearing information. So, in the 2016 plans and prior, the Region L chose to go above and beyond what the requirements were. So instead of one public hearing, Region L chose to have 3 public hearings in person, and they were held in San Marcos, San Antonio, and Victoria. In the last cycle, 2021 plan, the intent was also to have 3 in-person public hearings. However, we had to flex and transition to having 3 virtual public hearings because of the COVID pandemic and restrictions. So, again, at a minimum, we'll need to have 1 public hearing, and we're planning to record that public hearing and then make that recording and the materials available on Region L's website. And then wanted to ask you all about what if you all want to include additional efforts. So one option could be having another in-person meeting. It could be a public meeting if you choose, or it could be an informal in-person and or virtual meeting, or it could be a virtual webinar, or potentially, just making that presentation of the public hearing available on the homepage of the regionaltexas.org website. So wanted to throw it to you all and request your direction about how you all want to proceed with the public hearings and the outreach for the Steckles IPP, given that the requirements will be public hearing. Yes, sir.
Lauren, to get us started on this discussion, at the staff work group, I offered up whether the planning group wants to hold the one public hearing or more than one. We'd be happy to make those lists available to the region so we can meet that requirement. We have the virtual technology, easy access, and we'll be happy to host one here if that's the wish of the
Thanks.
Any discussion on which way we will proceed?
Mr. Ramos, I have a comment. How much, as far as budget, what are we budgeting for this, Lauren? Do we have a budget for,
Yeah, so the budget is provided to us by the Texas Water Development Board, and they split out the budget by task. So the task budgets are based on the scope, and the scope is one public hearing. So from that standpoint, we are already limited in terms of what budget is available. As you saw in that previous slide, we've had 56 meetings and spent a lot of time with public outreach and involvement. So from a budgetary standpoint, I would be concerned if we had three in-person public hearings or meetings.
This is Diane Wassenack. May I speak?
Yes, ma'am, please do.
I represent the public in my seat, and I think looking at the costs of holding in-person meetings and the very slim attendance we have had, it does make a lot of sense for us to have one public meeting and then have liberal other opportunities for people to comment and learn about the plan, and perhaps some other virtual hearings.
Okay. Any other discussion, or do we need a motion on this? And
It's up to you.
Okay. Well, I probably would like to take a vote on it, so I need someone to make a motion on a plan.
Can I make a distinction really quick? There's a distinction between a public hearing and a public meeting.
Right.
So I don't believe if you all choose to have additional in-person meetings, I don't think it needs to be 3 public hearings, 1 hearing and another meeting or something like that. So just wanted to make that distinction before the motion goes out there.
My motion would be to have 1 in-person meeting, virtual option, and then 1 evening virtual meeting, so that folks that are working never have an option to do it. We did that with the regional floodplain, and that was the best fit for everybody to have that option.
To include virtual webinars with that?
Yes.
Is the public meeting gonna be recorded and put on the website too, anyway, no matter what?
Yeah, the public hearing will be in-person and virtual, and the recording will be on the website no matter what.
Did I second that?
The motion is second, and if I understand correctly, the motion is to have 1 public in-person meeting. Hearing, that would have a virtual option, and that would be posted onto the website for that, plus 1 virtual meeting or web, that would allow public active at that same time, public participation in the evening, at a later date, and then additional webinar.
Virtual webinar, so it would be on the lines of recording and
Okay, so is that 2 or 3?
So the recording of the hearing would be posted on the website at the time that it happens,
So it's
the
always-
first hearing. So that'll be always on the website for somebody to access at any time throughout this process. Outside of that, we'll have, if y'all choose to do a virtual meeting that's in the evening for those who can't access whenever we do the in-person meeting, the hybrid meeting, available. And then I just also want to clarify that the in-person, are y'all agreeing for this to be held in San Antonio Saw's location?
Yes.
Yes, my motion is for it to be held during this meeting room.
Okay.
At what time, during the day?
During the evening, your question, if we have that meeting in the evening, then that satisfy all.
I don't know, I'm not the motion maker, I think it might, I'm leaning towards the idea of at least having 2 times, it could both be in the evening for all the matters, but.
I think there should be
Just
two
to have-
separate meetings. It should be a personal or in person with the virtual, and then the second virtual option for someone to have a chance for a second viewing. I mean, the virtual options are inexpensive. You don't have to post the meeting there, so that's my motion.
But both of them being live?
Yes. And then the recording of the virtual webinar for the website.
Does everyone understand what the motion is? Or recap what I think it is right now? Okay, the motion is to hold a public hearing in person here in this room. That would be also virtual, and that recording would be put onto the website. That would be our webinar. Also to hold a second meeting, that would be virtual only. That one will definitely be in the evening. And that would allow active participation at that time.
They will both be in the evening.
That's fine. One, I think, in the spirit of the motion, at least one has to be. Both could be.
Correct. That's correct, sir.
That's okay. That's the motion on the floor. We have a second. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Listen, Mr. Ramos, I just want to make sure, Lauren, everything you're hearing budget-wise, are we going to have enough money to cover what we're doing here? The remainder of the budget?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, then I'm fine. That's all I wanted to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Any other comments, questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
For the virtual option, that is not a public meeting, correct? That is just an informal virtual meeting.
Oh, it's not a hearing.
Meeting. It's not a hearing, but it's not a public meeting either, subject to the Open Meetings Act. Just want to make sure that
Oh, yeah, you
That's-
covered the open meeting, yeah.
it's okay. I don't think you can have a public meeting virtually. I think you have to have an in-person component. I just wanted to ask the question, make sure we were clear about it all.
I will concur with Lauren's explanation.
Michelle, is that accurate?
Yes, that's
from me.
Thanks, but it's also acceptable.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
All right, so we have a motion, a second. Any more discussion? Sensing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed? It passes. We will do that one.
Okay, so the next task is these actions, essentially, so that there are 3 of them. So the first one is essentially adopting the IPP and then authorizing the technical consultant, us, to address DB27 updates, non-substantive revisions, planning group changes, and basically what we've discussed here today, prior to the IPP submittal. And then the second one is authorizing the technical consultant, us, to submit the IPP package to the Texas Water Development Board on behalf of the South Central Texas Regional Water Planning Group by March 3rd. And then the third one is authorizing the San Antonio River Authority to post a public notice and hold a public hearing on the IPP.
You can do this in one motion,
Well, I don't know.
if somebody so chooses.
I don't think you can, because they're separate agenda items, right, on the.
The one agenda item is six.
They're all subtasks of one agenda.
So moved in mass.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Sensing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Is there any opposition? No opposition? Congratulations. We've passed.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone here, for all of your efforts here. I know you all are volunteers. You're doing this out of the goodness of your heart and for the benefit of the community, and I appreciate you.
Well, Thank you and your team for all your hard work. All right. That concludes item 8, right? So that moves us to item number 9, discussion of appropriate action regarding establishment of additional subcommittees. We did have a quick discussion about potential subcommittee earlier. Darrell, do you have any thoughts on that, or tell you what I heard?
Well, I think it's necessary, but it's only necessary if we can get things back progress. So I would suspend any discussion of it, I think. Okay. I mean, I think it's important that we address that time at the earliest convenience, so that there is communication. And we have effective data. And we're never gonna get data that everybody agrees with, but at least we have the communication of, we're not going down this path. Or just,
We're not.
yeah.
But if somebody in the group wants to establish a committee today, we can, but if not, I would ask Kai to put a note somewhere that when we start the next planning session, to remind us that we had this discussion and that at the appropriate time, we would revisit that subcommittee creation.
Yep, absolutely.
I concur with Dr. Brown on
Thank you. Any other requests or thoughts on subcommittees? We'll move to item number 10, schedule and potential agenda items for the next meeting. Our next meeting is, talked about earlier, is Q3, August 28th. So we got a long break to our next meeting. And next item, number 11, our last public comment for the day. Is there anybody?
Do we have an estimated date of the public hearing?
Right now, some of the main timelines would be between April 21st through the 28th. That's a popular time frame for the IPP hearings, and also just the first week of May. We're really just targeting before the third week of June. So the dates aren't concrete right now. That's just kind of some timeframes that we could do it, but we'll keep everybody updated on the hearing date and the virtual meeting, as well as when everything's posted online.
Thank you. So is there any public comment at this time? Anybody like to make any comment to the public? See any? So that moves us to item number 12, which is adjournment. I'll say. All right. Then we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
No, I know my leadership. All my friends are on the coast here, and I was Thank you. See you all. Right. Don't push that hard.